Hello, everyone, and welcome to Day 2 of our Apostolic Heroes Special. Today, Bishop Larry Booker takes us back to his childhood in Canyon City. From fishing trips and fried chicken to the teachers who changed his life. It's a reminder that gratitude grows out of the smallest blessings.
When you were young, I know you moved a bit, and probably there was no real consistency to this, but what did a regular day look like in your 7-8-year-old life?
You know, you're very much correct in that I did move a lot. And so when I think of regular day, I think about days, my regular day at my Aunt Laura and Uncle James's house. I think of a regular day when I stayed with my Aunt Margaret and her husband. I think of a regular day, what it would be like when I was with my grandma and grandpa. A regular day when I'd spend the summers with my Aunt Arvella and Uncle Bob on their dairy. I'd think of days when I would be with my Uncle Frank and Aunt Ida. And so those days were like that. When we lived in Canyon City, I think of regular days, 7 or 8. When we lived in Canyon City, my brother, mom, and I, she worked at a restaurant, and I went to a little 2-room schoolhouse, and so I was there in the 3rd and 4th grade, and I was there in the 3rd grade, and in the summer of the 4th grade, she married Arthur Booker, and then we moved up to Rye, Colorado. And when my mom married my stepdad, that's when going, as it were, kind of like from pillar to post, those days were over. And when I say pillar to post, it's not those. I don't remember being depressed at any of my aunts and uncles. Well, I could be. I had one aunt that Lauren James. James was awesome. She was something. Be that as it may, I was not a sad child, and I loved my aunts and uncles, and they loved me, and they were very, very good to me. So, but when I got to 4th grade, and my mom had married Arthur Booker, Buzz, we called him, and he adopted us. That's when life evened out. We lived up in the mountains of Rye, Colorado. We'd go to school. It was up in the Rocky Mountains. I remember going on hikes, going to the Greenhorn Mountain Stream, going fishing with my brother Philip, going to the top of Mount Baldy. That was unbelievable. Walking with a boy named Larry French. Took us all day, got home late at night. Things of that nature. Those are when my mom married my stepdad, that's when our life took a really, really, really good turn. And that's when I realized, I guess we really were poor, because we're in this nice house that he's renting, and here comes new carpet, and here's a brand new couch, and a dinette set brand new, and a new icebox, and I'm looking at all this, everything's brand new, and I remember my mom and I hugging each other, crying. Just because everything was so nice. But I hadn't realized it wasn't nice until it got nice. And yeah.
Well, for a lot of these apostolic kids that are listening, many of them don't realize how good they have it.
Yes.
And so if you're listening, be appreciative a little bit of the things that God's given you and blessed and put in your life.
And I will say this, if you're listening and maybe your life is, my mother was a sweetheart. I'm telling you, she was a sweetheart. And on and on and on. That was a godsend. But if your life is less than, quote, pristine, everything nice, this and that, God had his eye on me in those days, and God saw the future, and God sees exactly where every one of you are, and He's got a future for you. He really does. Let Him do what He wants to do. He's got a purpose and a powerful, beautiful, sweet future for you. Just get a hold of Him, hang on, and don't let go. Go for the ride. It's good.
Absolutely. So when you were young, let's stay there just for a little bit longer. What was your favorite thing to eat when you were young? If you had to pick one thing that Mom made or whatever.
I think my favorite food, I think my favorite was fried chicken. And seems like we ate a lot of it back in those days. And I really liked fried chicken. And depending like on which aunt I stayed with, everybody had their cooking deals. And my grandmother, all of my family, my mother was a fabulous cook. But my grandmother made these yeast rolls, these tall yeast rolls. And man, you get them, slap butter on them. They were the cat's meow. Fried chicken. Every once in a great while, we'd get a hamburger out somewhere. But there was a place in Canyon City, sometimes depending on who was with, we would go there, and you could get 7 hamburgers for $1.
Woo!
Yeah, 7
Hey, you can get one hamburger for $7 now.
That's exactly right.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky. And 7 hamburgers. They weren't big, and they weren't triple deckers or anything like that. But to a kid,
oh yeah,
a hamburger from a place hot out of a sack, and sometimes you get to eat 2 of them. I mean, you're just whoa. So yeah, life had little treats like that. I will give you one other Sunday school story.
What's that?
When I was with my Uncle Leonard and Aunt Margaret, they had a daughter named Linda, and they would let us off at Sunday school, and they give us a little bit of offering to put into the plate, you know. So we'd watch them, and 3 out of 4 Sundays, once they drove off around the corner, and we knew they'd be back about 12:15. We'd take off down the street, me and my brother and my cousin Linda. And you could buy a lot for $0.05 in them days.
Oh, my.
So my memories of what I learned in those classes were pretty nil. I learned what a nickel could buy back then. Don't do this. I'm just telling you what I did.
For sure.
Don't do this.
What was your least favorite thing you had to eat regularly?
Oh my, the least favorite. You almost had to hold me down and shove broccoli down my throat. I mean, it was like, I'm not a rabbit, please. Beets, red beets. They were like, why would anybody want to eat that? Those are the 2 things that really stand out. There's nothing else that comes to my mind, but red beets cooked up and served like you're supposed to fall in love with them, and broccoli was like, I can't get this.
I think you have a lot of kids amening you right now. They're probably behind you. So you mentioned you did well at school when you were young, but did you actually like it? Did you enjoy going to school?
You know, I did, and a lot of it I learned. It really did. Anyway, with me, a lot of it depended on the teacher.
Yeah.
And
unfortunately, that's true for a lot of things.
It is. It really is. And I was fortunate, and the teachers in those days, really honestly, all they had was the agenda of teaching children. And there was no weird stuff, none. We got history. We learned about the United States, how it came about. We learned about the Civil War and the whys and the causes and the results. And I really had some very, very good teachers. I remember in the 1st grade, years ago, my brother and I, we both went to an elementary school called Carlisle. And so we went to Carlisle, my brother and I. He's 2 years older than me. and we asked if we could. Said we used to go to school. That this is before shootings and all that stupid stuff, and they allowed us to walk around. And I went to the classroom, second floor, far west end, facing west on the left-hand side. And I'm looking through that little window there on the door, because that's the class where I first learned to read. I remember the first word I ever learned. Well, the teacher, she looks up and sees us. And so I just kind of waved, and she come up and said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "When I was a little boy in the first grade, this was my classroom." She said, "Are you serious?" I said, "Yes." Well, now I'm 72 now, and I must have been probably in my 50s at that time. And she said, "Would you mind coming in and addressing these children?" I said, "Are you serious?" She goes, "Please, please come." So I went in, the chairs were arranged differently. And I said, "Well, I'm a minister. I'm a minister. I pastor a church." Back then, of course, I did. I said, and I walked over to where my desk was. This is where my desk was. And right up there were the alphabet in capital letters and then in small letters. They were in block, and on this wall was the same letters in cursive. And so we would learn that. And then sometimes they would connect letters and there would be a word. I would never forget, I looked up on that wall and I saw the word L-O-O-K, and it's the first word I ever recognized, look. So I was looking and I saw and recognized look. I never forgot that. Once I conquered that word, I remember I was in that class, and I became a voracious reader of the Dick and Jane series, literally. See Dick run, run Dick, run fast Dick, Spot, catch the ball Spot, and it was books like that. And I would get consumed in that stuff. And the teacher was Miss Brown, and Miss Brown, and she was so neat and so kind. And I'm reminiscing. You guys do with this what you want to do. I'm sitting there. I'm obsessed with this book, and I look around and there's nobody there. And I look in the back room, and all the chairs are in a circle around Miss Brown, and she's talking to them. Well, I was oblivious that there'd even been. So I go back there and I grab a chair, and what she's telling us is that she's going away and she's getting married and she's moving back to the eastern. This is Pueblo, Colorado. She's moving back to the eastern part of this nation, and she's very happy. And half of us kids are sitting there, and we got tears in our eyes because we're going to lose Miss Brown. Anyway, Miss Brown, I'm going to throw out names of teachers that affected me profoundly. Mrs. Holloway, that was in the third grade, and I didn't know, when we moved up there, I didn't know how to write cursive. And all those third graders were writing cursive, and I didn't know how. Because that's when my mom started, we moved to Canyon City. And Mrs. Holloway, my mom went and talked to her and said he's feeling bad because he doesn't know how to write cursive. She asked me to stay in for lunch, said, "Eat your lunch here," and she showed me how to write cursive. And so every lunch until I learned cursive, she would spend time with me. And so Mrs. Holloway, she was an old woman then. She stands out in my mind. Fifth grade teacher, Mr. Hitchcock. He was an amazing teacher, former Marine, but a great guy. Mr. Crane died of a heart attack in my high school year. He was a history teacher, and I fell in love with his teaching. And he really helped me with history. And then I'm in my senior year. I am an idiot. I would go to the classroom. I'd sit in the back, and the teachers wanted me in the back, unless I'd mouth off and they'd keep an eye on me. So I'd sit in the back. I'd put my head on my arms, and I'd go to sleep. And then I'd hear the bell, and then I'd get up and I'd go to the next class. And the teachers loved to have it so. Just leave him alone. Let the sleeping dog sleep. But I went into this one class. It was the beginning of my senior year. And I laid my head down. And there was a man named Mr. Miller. He's probably 5'3". Had thick glasses, thick. Looked like an owl. White-headed. He was an old man, probably 55. And they called him the old gray fox. So I'm laying my head down, and he gets up and he starts talking. And he grabs my attention. So I turn my head sideways. I got my head down, but I'm watching him. And he holds up this book. He said, "This is your history book. It's not completely true, but most of it's true. There are some mistakes in it. If you treat me right, I'm going to get up every day and I'm going to talk and I'm going to tell you history and I'm going to tell you what really happened, and I will test you on what comes out of my mouth. If you are not good, if you're not nice, and if you don't treat me right, here's the book. You will read this book. I will test you out of what's in the book. So you pick what kind of teacher you want." And he would start talking history. History. Melted in his mouth. He made me fall in love with history. Seriously, I was captivated. Mr. Miller. The reason I love history so much now is that. So I will just say this. It's many, many, many years later. I was a wreck in high school. My average was D minus. Now, when we took the SAT tests, I had a teacher so mad at me, he wanted to hit me. Because he said, if you'd have got 1 point higher on your SAT, you would have automatically been eligible for college scholarships. But I had a D minus average, but I could pass tests. That's the only reason I even passed high school. And if I'd have got 1 point higher. So now it's years later. I'm pastoring. I'm back. I go to South High School. They allow us. There's only one teacher left. And that was there when I was a teenager. He's an old man now. And I looked in there and I remembered why I didn't like him. He's the guy that made me hate English. and I remembered why I didn't like him. But anyway, so I go back to the office and I said, "Is Mr. Miller still alive?" They call him the old gray fox. Well, there's 2 secretaries. One was older. She said, "Yes, he's still alive." I said, "Is there any way I can get a hold of him?" And they said, "No, we're sorry, that's contrary to policy. You can't." I said, "Well, here's the reason." And I told him how bad I was, how wretched I was, how Mr. Miller made me fall in love with history. Now today I'm pastoring a church. And so the older lady slips away. I'm talking to the young woman, the young secretary. I'm seeing out of the corner of my eye the older lady's on the phone. And then she comes back and the lady says, "So I'm sorry, we just can't do that." She turns away and the older secretary slips me a piece of paper and said, "You need to hurry." And I picked it up and it was an address. She had called Mr. Miller. So when I get there, it was only a couple of blocks from the school. I pull up and there's this old precious lady standing on the doorstep waiting for me on the porch. She goes, "I'm so glad you came." I get in, she goes, as we're going in, she goes, "He's just at the beginning stages of Alzheimer's. So this will mean so much to him." And I sat down there with him and he says he remembered me. And I walked him through how he affected me. Everything I've just told you, I said, you, Mr. Miller, made me fall in love with history. And I've leaned on it and used it voraciously ever since. And I told him I was a preacher and how good God had been to me, and told him about my boys, you boys, and you're grown, and da-da-da-da-da. And we were all crying. We were all crying and hugging. And on the way out, I said, do other students ever come by? She goes, every once in a great while, somebody will come. Yeah.
Wow. Well, you may have answered the next couple questions already, but I was going to ask what your favorite subject was. Can I assume history?
History, not even a question.
And your worst quite possibly may have been English, or at least one of them.
Yeah, I really did used to like English, but that teacher, he just soured me out on it. In fact, I had an English teacher that I really liked. I was actually, it was my junior year, in his class I was getting A's. Okay, and what they did, they went, there was 4 quarters in a year. And so this was a quarter. It was the last half of the year. The first quarter, I got A's under this teacher. He died. This guy came in, and I went from A's to F's.
Oof.
And the guy was just, he was insufferable, and I went from A's to F's. So I got a C for the quarter. Yeah. And then I had the ill luck to no, I didn't. That was another story. Never mind.
No problem.
Yeah.
Whoa, that was pretty amazing, right? Tomorrow we'll hear how those early lessons led him to a life-changing moment of faith. Don't miss it on Apostolic Heroes right here on the ARK, Apostolic Radio for Kids.